Armored Bear Productions. Welcome to Not Safe for Wizards, an actual play 5th edition D&D podcast. Hi, you're listening to a prologue episode of Not Safe for Wizards. I'll be talking to Pete Stein, who plays Oryon Edarr'io Aldion. Let's get started. He's a paladin of Adar. Well, okay, you tell me. So, what was Oryon doing before becoming an adventurer?
Well, prior to becoming an adventurer, I mean, it's worth establishing that Oryon is a pretty young guy by the point at which we meet him in the adventure. Prior to that, he came up in the Church of Adar. He was, for all intents and purposes, the consummate altar boy type. He came up in the church. His family was middle class, but very, very committed and dedicated to the church. He is that kid who went on all the missions trips and was a prestigious and important member of the youth group. And so, consequently, when he had the opportunity to meet with some visiting delegates from a very specific sect of the church, he jumped at the opportunity to learn about finding better ways to commit himself more fully to his religion.
So that kind of answers the next was why did Oryon decide to become an adventurer?
Yeah, he fell in with a group of more slightly more extreme types who are looking to ferret out the forces of evil, of Vixtus, the deceiver god. And so he's committing himself and making it his life's purpose to ferret out the forces of Vixtus and make them not alive.
So Oryon's a paladin. He serves Adar in a sect that is definitely not a cult.
Absolutely not a cult.
So what, though, are Oryon's core values?
His values are he's committed to Adar's teachings as the god of life. He believes that he is to uphold the value of life and to uphold the light and to bring the darkness out to the light by any means necessary.
So we have established that you do have a particular deity that Oryon worships, being Adar.
Absolutely, he's very committed.
What is Oryon's belief about the other gods?
He acknowledges the existence of the other gods, but he is strongly of the belief that there's only really one true god. Adar stands above all. Adar is the light and the life of the world, and everyone else is lesser and below the light and the life of Adar.
So Oryon has, he has this path he's on. What are the long-term plans for Oryon? What's his goal? What's the end game for Oryon?
Ultimately, he realizes that seeking out the enemies of Adar, seeking out the acolytes of Vixtus is going to be a lifelong goal. It's not the kind of thing that he has any misconceptions that it's going to be done this week or this month or this year. He knows that he has to be ever vigilant to seek out people who would harbor evil.
I guess Oryon is prepared, if necessary, to give his life in the service of this quest, this crusade.
He absolutely is, though he also very much believes that he is especially under the protection of Adar. He knows that Adar is the god of life, and he believes that he is protecting life around him, and that he is given special protection by God to go out and do God's work.
So, Oryon, we've talked before, basically a little bit about the we've talked about the sex approach to other people and their beliefs and how they might try to force conversions. Is there a line, though, in this quest that Oryon is not willing to cross?
I think that this story that we are telling, it's in its own way, it's kind of an origin story for Oryon. He is young. He is still learning what the world is. He's been very sheltered. He's a little bit naive. He doesn't completely understand that people don't look at the world in the same way that he looks at the world. When presented with the fact that people would actually not want to follow his God in the same way that he does, it oftentimes just confuses him. He doesn't understand it at all. And I think that part of this journey is him becoming a little bit disillusioned with what he thought the world was. It's not quite this picture of perfection that he thought it was. It's not as easy to go out and just say to people, hey, I am here representing the God of life. You should follow, and you should tell me if your neighbors are maybe involved with Vixtus, for everybody's good. And then people shut the door on him, and he doesn't understand that. And I think he's lacking a certain degree of responsible guidance, and I think that what we're going to see is that makes where his line stands both sort of nebulous and also constantly evolving or devolving, depending upon how you look at it. We've already had a circumstance where he needed some information and he was absolutely willing to do whatever it took to get that information, and it just kind of ended up fortunate that it didn't come down to a whole lot of violence, because he probably would have gone ahead and enacted a lot of violence if that's what it had taken.
So amongst the adventuring crew that Oryon is part of, is there a particular character that he has a fondness for, or a connection to?
It's a funny thing. I feel that he looks at Chase in this strange kind of camaraderie where he absolutely believes he is going to save Chase's soul, and that one day Chase is going to be just like he is. Realistically, I cannot imagine a scenario in which that happens. But Oryon doesn't realize that. I think Oryon wants to sort of protect Chase because he has a belief that Chase has a greater destiny. He's not really exactly sure what it is. He just has this feeling, and he's going with that feeling, which is kind of Oryon's MO. He gets an idea in his head, and then he is going 110% with it.
On the flip side of that, is there any characters in the group that Oryon's like, whoa, I'm...
I don't particularly think so. I think he looks at everyone as an opportunity to convert a person to being an acolyte of Edar. Like I had said, he's a little bit naive that way, more than a little bit. He thinks that there's at least a chance with everybody. I think if anyone is starting to push his buttons a little bit, it might be Lilith. I think Lilith is looking at Oryon's kind of ridiculous ways and telling him, hey, your ways are pretty ridiculous. And he's not really sure how to respond to that. And he's realizing that the harder I push, it's not really fixing it. Why isn't it fixing it? I should be able to push harder, and then everything's fine, and it's not working.
So Pete, we've played other games together. So want to take a stroll down memory lane. When did you first get involved with? We could say D&D, but any tabletop role playing game.
I consider myself to have come into tabletop gaming a little bit later than I think people assume I did. It was actually a little bit after I had already finished with high school. I was probably about 19 or 20, and I had a friend who was playing Warhammer at the time and tried to get me involved. And it actually didn't. It's one of those games that didn't really pan out. It's one of those games that just kind of dissolved into nothingness before it ever really started. But what it did do was introduce me to the concepts and introduce me to these games where you make up a character and you get to be that character and you get to invest yourself in this creation that you birth out of your brain. Even though it didn't pan out as a game, it put that hook inside of me. And then maybe about a year or two after that, I became involved with another group who invited me over into a game that they had in progress, and I joined into that. And that was AD&D, and I was a Dwarven fighter. That was
like
my
you
first
do.
Real character, because I figured, being a fighter, I said to them when I got there, I'm like, this seems really complicated. How about you give me something where my part of this is I hit things really hard, because I can handle that. Point me in a direction, have me hit something. But of course, what realistically ended up happening is I, being the kind of person that I am, became wholeheartedly invested in being my character. I find that I just really enjoyed the escapism fantasy of getting to be somebody else, somebody who maybe doesn't sit in an office in front of a computer for 8 hours a day, somebody who goes out and runs through a field and then hits a goblin upside the head and squishes it. And that was an eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah, you don't not a whole lot of squishing things in the head and looting their pockets.
I mean, not that my lawyer has instructed me not to talk about that.
That's a good spot. So playing across the editions, playing across various games, you kind of alluded to the what brings you back to playing, what drives you for playing. Anything else in that vein you can think of? Why we're willing to take 3 hours, 4 hours on a Wednesday night to get together.
I've done this off and on for now going on 20 years, and I spent a big portion of that time DMing myself. And for me, like I said, it's escapism. It's getting outside of your life, and I've always found an appeal in the idea that, given the right circumstances, given the right game system, the right group, you can be and do literally anything. You can start a game where you say, no, my character sits in an office in front of a computer for 8 hours a day, and that's the character I'm rolling up. There are infinite possibilities, and that's what keeps bringing me to it. That's why I've never been able to achieve any kind of escape velocity and saying, no, that's not really a thing I want to do anymore. It's not a thing I want to get away from, because I'm a creator. I like to create fantasy worlds. I like to flesh them out and live in them. I like to create characters with rich backstories. I'm the kind of person who will work role playing into any given tabletop game, even when it's not particularly appropriate. You should see me role play chess. It's magical.
We'll definitely have to record a session of us playing chess, role playing it.
Oh man, those bishops.
Well, I want to thank you, Pete, for taking time to sit down with me. I am Joseph Falk. I am the DM. Thank you for listening. Hey, I just want to thank you for listening to this Prologue episode. If you'd like to help support the podcast, right now the best way for you to do that is to leave us a review on iTunes. Even if you don't use iTunes, it's the best way to help make sure that we're appearing in the algorithm so more people can find us. In the show notes, we'll have where you can find the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Hi, thanks for listening to that episode of Not Safe for Wizards here on YouTube. If you would give us a thumbs up for a like, hit that subscribe button, and of course hit the notifications bell. That way you'll always know when Not Safe for Wizards is putting up a new episode. Thanks.